Okay, so take a look at the first one. You should figure that one out. What do we have in the numerator? Make sure you have your colored sheet next to you.
We have sine squared plus cosine squared, so that equals 1.
Exactly. So we have 1 over cosecant. Now, what do we know about cosecant?
One.
Yes, it's the reciprocal of the sine. Okay? So you have two choices. Since these are reciprocals, or since the sine, excuse me, is the reciprocal, you can just go straight to this and say the answer is sine. Because 1 over cosecant is its reciprocal, which is sine. Anytime you have a cosecant in the bottom, it's a sine in the top, and vice versa. If that's confusing for you, stop and think. This is 1 divided by cosecant, right? 1 divided by cosecant, which is 1 divided by 1 over sine, because that's what cosecant is, 1 over sine, which is 1 times sine over 1, and 1 times sine is sine. So you can go straight to this, or you can go through all the steps. That's up to you, whatever makes sense to you. But the answer is sine. Okay? Now, this next one, you remember yesterday or whatever day it was, I talked about how when I have these fractions like this, I like to think of them as tangent divided by secant.
Yeah.
Because you know what I'm going to do next, right?
You're gonna... Are you gonna put tangent as sine x over cosine?
That's exactly what I'm going to do. So sine over cosine, and then that's divided by what? What did you say secant was?
Secant is 1 over cosine.
Yep. So now I have a couple of fractions that I'm dividing, so I know what to do with that, right?
Yeah.
All right, so I'm going to invert and multiply, or flip it and multiply. So I have sine over cosine times cosine over 1. And what happens?
It cancels out the cosines.
It does. So the answer to this one is also sine. So the first two, the answer worked out just to be sine. Okay?
Okay.
All right, now look at the next one. What do you think we're going to do with the next one? We did some of these yesterday, or the other day. Think about that for a second. What do you think we're going to do?
We're gonna turn tangent into sine over cosine.
Yes. So we're going to make this negative sine over cosine. There's only one negative, so I don't care if you put it on the sine or the cosine, but there's only one. Now, cosine is cosine. We don't change cosine, so we're just going to leave it as cosine. And I'm going to go ahead and put it over 1 since I've got fractions in my problem.
Yeah.
All right, what's cosecant?
Cosecant is 1 over sine.
Yes, so I'm going to rewrite cosecant as 1 over sine. These are all multiplied, so I'm just stringing them along with each other. Now, sine squared is sine squared. We don't change sines and cosines. We'll change everything else, but not sines and cosines.
Okay.
All right, what's cotangent?
Cotangent is cosine over sine.
Okay. So now that you have it all written out, You're going to do what?
You're gonna cancel it out.
Whatever you can cancel, that's right. So we're just gonna start canceling. And tell me what you end up with. Cosines are out, sines are out. Now, one sine will cancel with that. So what do I have left on the top? I have a negative, don't forget that, I have a negative.
A negative, and then a sine x and a cosine.
Perfect. Do I have anything left on the bottom besides 1?
No.
There's your answer. That wasn't too bad. It looked bad, but didn't turn out so bad. Now, number 5 looks like it's going to be about the same thing. So let's jump down to number 5 for a second. We'll come back and get 4. But doesn't it look like 5 is the same kind of problem? It's just a string of stuff. So I'm going to start with 2 over 1. And you don't have to put that over 1, but I know I'm going to have a whole bunch of fractions. So it might help me keep it lined up if I make it 2 over 1.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. So then I have tangent. What is tangent?
Sine over cosine.
Yep. Cosecant.
It's cosine.
Cosecant is 1 over sine. The cos do not go together. The cos do not go together. So it's 1 over sine. Now remember, we don't change our sines and cosines. So we're just going to leave that cosine squared.
Okay.
I should say in these kind of problems we don't change them because we were hoping to cancel stuff. All right, what about cotangent?
1 over tangent.
Okay, that won't help me out in canceling though, will it?
Oh, yeah, sorry. It's cosine over sine.
Exactly. We aren't going to use 1 over tangent very often. It is 1 over tangent, that isn't wrong, but it just doesn't help us.
Yeah.
Okay. And then the sine, we just leave as the sine. I put it over 1.
Okay.
And now we're going to start canceling, right?
Yeah.
And let's see what we have left. What did you end up with?
A 2 and cosine squared.
That's all I ended up with too. Because these cancel, that cancels. So yep, so 2 cosine squared is your answer. Perfect. These aren't so bad, that kind anyway, aren't so bad.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when you look at number 4, would you agree that number 4 is a different kind of problem? I'm not going to do it the same way.
Yeah.
It looks different, right? 3 and 5 are just strings of functions all multiplied together.
Mm-hmm.
But 4 is different. 4 is kind of like 1. So look on your sheet. Do you have anything involving cosine squared anywhere on your sheet? In the top 8. I'm talking about just the top 8 there.
Just the top
8. Yeah, the ones I had you circled the other day in class.
Sine squared plus cosine squared equals 1.
Okay. So if I haven't already had you write this down, I want you to. This is already written down. Okay? But I want you to understand that you can move things in this equation. So another way of writing that equation would be cosine squared equals 1 minus sine squared. I can move this sine squared over to here if I want. And similarly, I can move the cosine squared over here. So if you haven't written these down on your colored sheet, write them down next to this.
Okay.
Okay, so now let's look at our numerator of our problem. It's 1 minus cosine squared over sine. Now, look at what you just wrote down. What does 1 minus cosine squared equal?
The sine squared.
Exactly. So I'm going to change that into sine squared because that's what it equals. So now I have sine squared over sine. What happens when you have sine squared over sine?
You can cancel out one of the signs.
Exactly. And you're going to be left with a sine on top. And that's your answer. All right. Now, the number 6 is also, it's like this one. Number 6 is like this one. I'm going to have to do some substituting in or something because I can't cancel. So I want you to look at it carefully, especially at the top. Look up at the top and tell me if you notice anything about the top.
Sine squared and cosine squared together equals 1.
Very good.
Tangent squared is secant squared.
Okay, so here we go. One at a time. This and this make 1. So now I have 1 plus tangent squared over secant. Would you agree with that?
Yeah.
Okay, so now I'm looking back at my sheet again. What does it say about 1 plus tangent squared?
A equals secant squared.
Exactly. So now I have secant squared over secant.
And you can cancel out one of the secants.
And be left with a secant on the top.
Yeah.
And that's your answer.
Right.
Isn't that easy?
Yeah.
Okay, did you write all that down?
Yeah, I did.
Okay, I'm going to give you credit for that homework then. You don't need to send it to me. I'll just put it in the grade book as completed. Not even sure if I have a due date in there yet since we haven't finished the work. But okay, why don't we do a couple more, and then unless you have something specific, you can go, okay?
Okay.
Let's do a couple more for practice, and I'm gonna shut up and let you do these by yourself, all right? Let me find my paper here. Let's see. I gave you an extra practice sheet. I'm just gonna pull a couple off here and see how you do. We're gonna do 2 of each kind.
Okay.
And when I say each kind, I mean, you know, we have the long string ones, so like this. Oh shoot, that doesn't work. So like this. And this one. All right, so try those, see what you can do. I'll do them too, and we'll see if we get the same answer.
Okay.
Tell me when you have the first one done.
Okay, I have the first one done.
What'd you get?
So tan would be sine over cosine.
Mm-hmm.
Cotangent would be cosine over sine.
Mhm.
Sine would just be sine x over 1.
Mm-hmm.
And then secant would be 1 over cosine.
Perfect. So you started crossing out, and did you end up with sine over cosine?
Yeah, so it'd just be tangent.
Very good, Lindsay. Super. All right, try that one.
Okay, I finished the second one.
All right. What'd you come up with?
So sine would be sine x over 1. Cosine is cosine x over 1. Tangent is sine x over cosine x. Cotangent is cosine over sine, and then secant is 1 over cosine.
Perfect. So,
And then you could cancel out 2 of the cosines, and then the other 2 cosines, and then 2 sines, and you're left with sine x.
yep, I think you're right. Sine x. Perfect. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. So, are you okay with that kind of problem?
Yeah.
Okay. So, when we take a quiz over all this, it'll have 2 problems on it, and one of the problems will be like this kind. Okay? Then the other one is going to be where you have to use those squared identities. So let me put a couple of these up here. All right, so something like this. And this. So think about the one we did one similar to this in the homework. Look at what you wrote on your colored sheet.
1 minus cosine squared equals sine squared.
Exactly. So you have sine cubed over sine squared, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what happens when you have sine cubed over sine squared?
You can. Sorry, I wrote this weirdly. You can take out 2 of the sines.
Exactly. And you'll be left with 1 in the numerator, right?
Yeah.
So sine x over 1 or just plain sine x.
Mhm.
Perfect. All right, try this one. Little bit trickier over here. See if you can figure it out.
So the bottom, the denominator would be, that would equal sine squared.
Yep, you're exactly right. Very, very good. That top is tricky though, isn't it?
Yeah.
What's wrong with it? What's wrong with the top?
The 1 is on the other side of the sign.
Exactly. And so what that means is, you know that 1 minus sine squared is cosine squared. That should be written on your paper.
Yeah.
Okay? But here's the problem. You're exactly right. The 1 is being subtracted. It's the negative 1. So here's what I want you to think about, Lindsay. What if I changed all the signs in that problem?
Oh, yeah.
Now, is
That would
this
work.
sine squared minus 1?
Mhm.
Yes. And what does it equal? Not cosine squared, but negative cosine squared. So when your problem is backwards, when the 1 is on the other side, like you said, then it's not cosine squared, it's negative cosine squared.
Right. So, okay. And that would end up being negative cotangent.
Squared. Perfect. Negative cotangent squared is your answer. That's exactly right. Exactly.
Right.
All right, you feel okay about that? We still have to finish our notes and practice some more, but I think you've got a good start toward doing well on this quiz anyhow, okay?
Mm-hmm.
You have anything else for me?
That's it.
All right, thanks Lindsay for coming in.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.